From a mischievous menace to a surprisingly layered character, this villain's journey takes some unexpected turns. Today, we're diving into how a seemingly simple antagonist became one of Dogman's most compelling foes. But first, let's start with the plot of this new sensational movie. Plot of Dogman. OK City's most infamous troublemaker, Petey the Cat, is always up to no good. But when one of his evil schemes leads to a devastating explosion, it sets the stage for the birth of an unlikely hero, Dogman. After a bizarre surgery stitches a police officer and his canine partner into one, Dogman becomes the city's beloved protector, constantly outsmarting Petey. But their rivalry takes an unexpected turn when Petey's own failed cloning experiment, Lil Petey, challenges everything he believes. As chaos becomes greater, enemies become allies, and the line between good and evil blurs in surprising ways. What makes a sympathetic villain? Not every villain needs to be likable, but the best ones are at least understandable. So, who's this villain we're rooting for? Of course, it's Petey. At first glance, he's a classic comedic bad guy, a troublemaker whose only purpose seems to be opposing Dogman. He's snarky, cunning, and, well, a cat. But as the story continues, his character gains unexpected depth. What sets Petey apart is his emotional conflict. His worldview is shaped by his past, which makes him a sympathetic villain, someone whose flaws and choices make sense, even when they go against the hero. And if you notice closely, you'll realize he's the complete opposite of a Dogman. Petey's role as the opposite of Dogman. Petey and Dogman couldn't be more different. One is a chaotic, scheming cat. The other is a noble, crime-fighting canine. Their rivalry is built on classic opposites: cat versus dog, bad versus good, disorder versus justice. But Petey's role in the story goes deeper than just being Dogman's enemy. At first, he seems like a typical slapstick villain, existing solely to cause trouble. He's clever, sarcastic, and always plotting his next big scheme. But as the movie goes on, it becomes clear that Petey's chaos is rooted in something deeper. Unlike Dogman, who acts on pure instinct and loyalty, Petey's actions come from a place of cynicism and past pain. While one blindly follows the rules, the other questions them, which makes their dynamic more than just hero versus villain. Maybe that's why Dogman isn't as humorous as Petey. Or maybe it's just Petey's cover. Comedy as a shield for evil. While Petey is a villain, he's also funny. Sometimes even more entertaining than the hero. His sharp wit, over-the-top schemes, and sarcastic remarks make him feel less like a serious threat and more like a playful trickster. This kind of humor sets his character apart from all the other villains we know. For Pete, it is easy to make the audience enjoy his antics without immediately seeing the depth beneath them. But we also know that many great villains use humor or intelligence to cover up their pain. And Petey is no different. His jokes, insults, and exaggerated confidence distract from the fact that he's carrying years of emotional baggage. And while it's easier to laugh things off than to deal with them, and that's exactly what Petey does, until he's forced to confront his past. The evil for the sake of it setup. This is why Petey doesn't start off as a layered character. He's just the bad guy, plain and simple, who was introduced as a troublemaker, causing chaos simply because he can. There's no tragic backstory, no emotional weight, just a mischievous cat constantly scheming against Dogman. This setup makes it easy to dismiss him as a goofy, one-dimensional villain. But that's exactly the point. By presenting Petey as evil for the sake of it, the story lowers the audience's expectations. He seems like the kind of character who exists purely for fun, not for deep character development. So when his true motivations and struggles begin to surface, it catches us off guard. What began as a simple, comedic villain slowly transforms into something much more, turning Petey from a caricature into a character worth rooting for. And that moment was when he met his kid, Little Petey. The twist on the baby changes the villain trope. Now, instead of a random baby melting his heart, he's confronted with a clone of himself, little Petey. This is his own younger self staring back, full of innocence and potential. Little Petey is everything he once was before life hardened him, and seeing that contrast is uncomfortable. At first, Petey tries to shape little Petey into a miniature version of his bitter, cynical self. But soon, he realizes he doesn't want his younger self to go through the same pain he did, which sets the stage for his reluctant but inevitable growth. Now, the question here is, what did Petey go through? Petey's flawed parenting and emotional walls. As we saw, Petey's version of parenting isn't about warmth, it's about survival. This approach keeps Petey firmly in villain territory. He's not suddenly redeemed just because he has a kid. His instinct is still to push others away and guard his emotions. But through these flawed lessons, cracks start to form in his emotional walls. Little Petey's optimism challenges and forces him to confront his own pain. His conflict isn't just with Dogman anymore. It's with himself, making his character arc all the more compelling. Petey's past and parental trauma. This is the moment he realizes, behind Petey's snarky remarks and criminal antics, he's a product of his upbringing. His father was cruel and shaped Petey into someone who believes the world is cold and unforgiving. Instead of growing up with love and encouragement, Petey was raised in an environment that taught him to expect the worst from everyone. And when we see how deeply his past affected him, his villainy takes on a tragic layer. He didn't wake up one day and decide to be bad. He was molded by circumstances beyond his control. The more you understand his past, the harder it becomes to see him as just another bad guy. Instead, he's someone trying, and often failing, to break free from the cycle of his own trauma. This is what it takes to be a sympathetic villain. The moment Petey becomes sympathetic. A sympathetic villain needs a defining moment, and for Petey, it's when he realizes he doesn't want little Petey to endure the same pain he did. Instead of staying committed to villainy, he faces an uncomfortable truth and doesn't like what that means. This shift doesn't erase his past actions, but it makes him more than just an antagonist. He isn't simply redeemed. He's torn between his old instincts and a new path. With this backstory, we all can now see him as more than a troublemaker. He's a wounded character, trying and often failing to be better. That struggle makes him compelling and ensures his redemption is earned, not forced. But how would a blunt villain balance his villainy with redemption? Balancing villainy with redemption. Well, Petey's growth doesn't happen overnight. Even after deciding to protect little Petey, he still causes trouble, throws out sarcastic remarks, and struggles with selfish tendencies. This balance keeps his transformation believable. He's changing, but he's still Petey. Showing a good redemption arc, Petey wrestles with his instincts, sometimes backsliding into old habits. He doesn't suddenly become a hero, but his small choices build towards something bigger. His redemption isn't about perfection, it's about effort. If he had changed instantly, it would have felt forced. Instead, we see him resist, fail, and eventually grow, making his journey far more impactful, until life gives him a chance of final redemption. The final redemption, sacrifice and growth. Whether it's taking the fall or putting himself at risk, he proves that he's no longer just looking out for himself. It's not just about protecting little Petey, it's about rejecting the worldview that made him who he is. But in choosing to protect little Petey, he proves himself wrong. He does what his own father never did. He puts someone else first. This moment cements his growth. He doesn't just regret his past, he actively chooses a different future. His redemption doesn't erase his flaws, but it shows that even villains can change. That's why he is more than a villain. Why Petey is a great sympathetic villain. And summing up, Petey stands out because he balances humor, conflict, and real emotional depth. His sarcasm makes him entertaining, but his struggles make him relatable. Unlike villains who turn soft once they show vulnerability, Petey never loses his edge. He remains clever and mischievous, keeping him compelling even as he changes. His past isn't an excuse for his actions, but it explains them. He wasn't born evil. He was shaped by circumstances beyond his control. His emotional walls, flawed parenting, and reluctant redemption make him more than a one-note antagonist. His growth isn't immediate, and that makes it feel real. But what makes Petey truly great isn't just his humor or his backstory. It's his struggle. He fights against his own instincts, backslides, and questions himself. When he finally chooses to be better, it feels earned. Something every villain should learn. What other stories can learn from Petey? Petey's arc is a blueprint for writing a great villain. First, villains need depth. They shouldn't just oppose the hero. They should have their own struggles and motivations. Second, humor can make villains more engaging. Petey's sarcasm makes him fun to watch, but it also serves as a mask for his pain. Most importantly, redemption should be earned. A villain's transformation shouldn't happen instantly. It should be a process. And the perfect example is Petey, who starts as a comedic antagonist, but his story proves he's more than that. Through humor, hardship, and eventual redemption, he becomes a villain worth remembering, and one we can't help but root for. His journey from a mischievous antagonist to a fully developed character proves that great villains aren't just obstacles for the hero. They have depth, struggles, and moments of growth that make them unforgettable. What do you think about Petey's transformation? Let us know in the comments. And if you enjoyed this breakdown, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon so you never miss more content like this. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.